Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to welcome you here today and to have you for the launch webinar of the sDHT Adoption Navigator for patient-centered medical product development. We can't wait to dive in with this amazing group of panelists and speakers that we have for you today. I'm going to run through a quick run of show and then hand it off. So we will get oriented and then invite our CEO, Jen Goldsack, for some opening remarks. We have a fireside chat with our regulatory colleagues. Then the program lead, Sarah, will take us through a guided walkthrough of the resources we're unveiling, the sDHT Adoption Navigator. And then we will bring on a group of experts in the area for a multi-stakeholder panel on overcoming some of the implementation hurdles that we see in this work. And then we will wrap up with some next steps and how to drive industry adoption of these resources. So I would love to welcome now to the virtual stage, Jennifer Goldsack, the Digital Medicine Society's CEO. Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Lucy, and welcome everyone. I'm delighted to be launching these resources and sharing what our team has been working on that I think unifies so many of the efforts that all of you on the line have been driving. And so many of my colleagues who are joining me during this launch event have also been working tirelessly on for a number of years now. So as Lacey said, Jen Goldsack, I'm the founder and CEO here at the Digital Medicine Society. For folks who don't know us, we are a global nonprofit, and essentially we exist in the market to support those individuals and organizations who are working tirelessly every single day to make sure that as we digitize the process of medical product development, as we digitize the way we care for people, and as we think about the use of large data sets and digital solutions in public health, that we do it in a way that truly returns to the people that our industry exists to care for. And also comes replete with a double bottom line that we are also thinking about making your systems, your futures, your teams, your organizations more sustainable into the future. When we launched the Digital Medicine Society in 2019, one of the pillars, one of our priorities was really to advance the use of sensor-based digital health technologies. We have long believed in the promise of these tools. So sensors that can capture critically important information and data about the lived experience of individuals, conditions, and diseases outside of the walls of the clinic. The ability to leverage compute stacked on top of that data to give us new insights into how people function, how people experience these conditions, but also how new medical products may be able to improve their lives. And we have sort of worked tirelessly to advance the use of sensor-based digital health technologies, not just in patient care, but to also give us answers about whether a new drug may be effective. This has been an area that over the last 6 or 7 years, so since 2019, I think has evolved enormously. We at the Digital Medicine Society maintain a library of digital endpoints that have been used to answer questions about the safety and efficacy of new medical products. And that has grown to nearly 400 unique endpoints. That's extraordinary adoption by industry. These aren't exploratory studies. These aren't pilots. These are measures and tools that have been used to answer questions about new medical products. And we're incredibly proud of that resource, and it remains one of our most accessed resources here at Dyne. We can also look across the field more broadly. We can look at things like the development and publication and now finalization of FDA guidance, the use of digital health technologies for remote data acquisition and clinical trials, strong signals from our regulatory colleagues of their support for the use of these tools to improve the way we develop new medical products. We can look across to our colleagues in Europe, where there is a qualified digital endpoint for use in for use as a primary endpoint in clinical trials in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And we can look in the US. Our colleagues at FDA have actually qualified a digital endpoint for use in the development of new medical devices. there is extraordinary momentum, and yet we've listened really carefully to all of you, those of you who are responsible for doing the hard work of making sure the promise of these tools and technologies return to both the patients, the drugs are ultimately here to sort of support, whose lives we're looking to improve, the experience of participants, and frankly, the economic feasibility of ongoing clinical trials to develop new medical products for the patients who are so desperately waiting for us to deliver life-saving solutions to them. And so as I look at what we are launching today, I'm not only incredibly proud of the team that has worked on this, our internal team. So Sarah, Lacey, Ben, Danielle, you've done extraordinary work. Our colleagues at FDA who have really believed in our ability to accelerate the field and reflect their enthusiasm for these tools by creating a really user-friendly resource for you all. And also that I think this distills for us that this part of the field, while it does feel to many still like a very sort of innovative tip of the spear endeavor, is incredibly mature when we look at the science and the regulatory clarity that underpins all of it. So we're going to spend a lot of time today looking at this resource, really talking about the value that it brings. But as I said, really just want to thank all of you for your tireless commitment to making sure that the promise that sensor-based digital technologies offer, that digital endpoints offer, to the way we develop new medical products, to the way we care for patients, that we are going to realize that. I think that this resource, coupled with what else is going on in the field, is going to be akin to the tipping point, and I'm excited to dive in more. But first, I am delighted to welcome one of our colleagues from FDA, Annie Saha, to join me in a short conversation here. Annie, why don't I ask you to introduce yourself, and then let's dive in for a few moments.
Sure. Thanks, Jen. Looking forward to the conversation and really excited about the Navigator being out. I'm Annie Saha. I'm Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives in the Digital Health Center of Excellence at the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. And I'm also acting on the Center for Drugs, leading some of the AI policy efforts in the Drug Center.
Fantastic. Then, Annie, we couldn't have a better partner in all of this than someone who truly has that visibility across CDRH and CEDAR. And, you know, as I've thanked our internal team, as I've thanked all of our sort of industry, academic, sort of patient stakeholders for their support, their participation in all of this work that we do to try and advance these tools to improve lives. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you personally, as well as FDA sort of more broadly, for continuing to go above and beyond, which is, I think, what you've done here, frankly, in making sure that it's not just guidances that are issues and then sort of good luck to you all, but really thinking about how do we make sure that we are sort of understanding where our colleagues in industry are, understanding their needs to actually be successful in pushing these forward, to continue investing in order that we can get the return for sort of innovative approaches to sustainable trials and improving lives. I'm curious about what it was about sort of this tool, our pitch, if you like, that what our industry colleagues needed was that sort of unifying tool that brought everything together, an interface that keeps pace with the sort of technology that we expect in other areas of our sort of working lives. What drew you to this, Annie?
Yeah, I think, first, obviously with the various guidances the FDA has put out, that we really are trying to show that we're both patient-centric, but really interested in how we can leverage digital health technologies, AI, digital health broadly, to develop better measures that can actually better reflect how a person's doing in their day-to-day life and have a better understanding of that rather than sort of those episodic one-off, when you visit the clinic and you have certain data points, but, there's a lot of opportunity to be able to better capture how people are doing and how people are responding to medical products. And so one of the things we sort of saw, even with putting the various guidances out and, having footnotes in the DHT guidance that point to, say, the PFDD guidances, is that the field itself is sort of very disparate. You have the measurement scientists who really know how to do the measurement aspect of developing clinical outcome assessments, or, the folks who do biomarker work, understand the biology and the physiology. And then you have sort of the technology developers who may not have the same knowledge in terms of thinking about what's important to patients from a PFDD perspective, and thinking more from a technology verification and validation perspective. And then you have sort of the data scientists who are thinking about sort of the AI algorithms that then overlay the wearable or the sensor-based digital health technology that you need in order to make sense of the data that's coming from the DHT. And so we're really seeing sort of disparate connections, both across the board. And I've even heard, people saying in their own companies that, you've got to bring together the clinical with the measurement, and they might sit in different business units. And so the idea with this tool and Navigator, and what we really wanted to see is, can we bring together these different resources? And there's a lot. Like, I know, Lacey, I know that Sarah will get to that when she goes through the Navigator itself, but there's a lot out there, but really bringing together a one-stop shop that can help support people to bring together that multidisciplinary expertise that's needed to really get digitally derived endpoints into trials.
Annie, I'm going to pull on one of your last comments there, which is there's a lot. And I think this is the point, right? As we were building this, the sort of the Navigator references, whether you're querying it as a sort of notebook LLM style or whether you're using the roadmap, there's 300 resources that passed a pretty aggressive sniff test to get into sort of the corpus of evidence that this is built on. Multiple regulatory guidances, many scientific publications, case examples, so on and so forth. And I think what we certainly heard from our industry colleagues as we were putting this together is there's just so much work that goes into distilling the different pieces of evidence that should be giving us confidence to move this forward. And there are so many different ways that our colleagues, particularly within pharma, have to sort of navigate stakeholders around them, whether it's, they're making vendor sort of selection decisions and what does good look like? What are the best practices? What's the evidence? What are the different ways of working and different sort of models that we could have? Obviously the vendors benefit from that too, and they'll sort of benefit from this. There are also the internal decision makers. Just as you said, Annie, there are sort of the measurement teams, the clinical teams. How can we maximize the sort of ease with which they can share like a common definition of what good looks like? How can they access the best sort of available knowledge, information, sort of regulatory best practices? And then how can they drive sort of decision makers towards continued investment to get this to where we need to go? One of the things that stood out to me in sort of stepping back is really just how mature the scientific evidence is, the regulatory evidence. And yet one of the things, and I'm sorry if this is going to sort of drive you sort of up the wall, is, I talk to colleagues in industry and they'll sort of say, but we're not sure about regulatory acceptance of all of this. The section in the roadmap, the section in Navi, as it relates to sort of regulations, I think is going to be really powerful. But I wonder, Annie, if you could sort of give voice to and we've got Robert who's going to speak later as well, how you guys think about the value of these tools, the mechanisms that you've set up internally to make it as easy as possible to be turning around like good responses, great collaborations with industry.
Yeah, we really see the value of better measurement, and digital is not always going to be the right choice all the time, and that's part of the Navigator as well. And we've set up work and developing tools internally for our teams to be able to support them along the way, and then also recognizing we have to do that same multidisciplinary expertise internally of bringing together the COA biomarker folks with in a lot of cases, these are being used in drug trials. So you're bringing together the CDRH reviewers with the CDER, or other biologic review teams as needed. And there are lots of consults that happen that CDRH does to CDER to help support, especially looking at some of the verification, validation, some of the AI aspects. And so we are trying to do what we can internally to create momentum and support reviewers as much as possible. And then, these tools like this are both supportive both for internal and external use. But I think the message I always want to hammer home is that we have been open for business and we will continue to be open for business. So we don't want regulatory to be the scary reason or fear that people think, oh, well, FDA is not going to accept it, so I'm not going to do this. So, we try to dispel that myth as much as possible.
Annie, I appreciate that. And I have this sort of urge to ask you about, how do people come in, or like, why should they do it, or when should they do it? But all of that is addressed in the Navigator. So I'm not going to touch on that. I'm going to ask you instead for something that you can sort of uniquely provide, which is how are you, what are your expectations? What's your definition of sort of success as we look at the impact we're hoping to have from this tool? How are you hoping it changes perhaps the way that people approach the agency or the information you're receiving, for example?
Yeah, I think hopefully one, tool helps provide clarity for people of how to develop these digitally derived measures and sort of walk through the full process and sort of thinking through all the steps and all the different types of expertise that are needed, and a way to sort of provide sort of some clarity and simplification of all the resources in order to be able to get through the pathway. And then, ultimately, obviously, we want to see these measures being used in trials, and hopefully, ultimately that medical products are approved or authorized that leverage these measures. And that ultimately, obviously, what we all are looking to do is to improve people's health.
And Annie, I think where you just sort of landed with that last comment is most important. And I think one of the things that we try and champion at Dime, one of the things that I appreciate about our industry, our academic, our sort of, patient collaborators, but one of the things I really admire in the interactions we have with you and the rest of your team at FDA is that the dogged focus is on improving patients' lives. And this is just a new and very powerful tool for the job that we really believe can do a number of things, that it can really help us sort of focus on new medical products that address the most important elements of a patient's experience of their disease and condition, that it can help speed the development or the access to new sort of products by speeding trial timelines, that it may be able to make certain disease states perhaps sort of commercially more appetizing for investment for the development of new therapies. Because part of the work that we've done, again, referencing the Navigator here at Dime and with colleagues at Tufts and across industry, is to actually look at ROI calculations, and it's there and it's very real. And I appreciate that. I think collectively where we are as a field right now is recognizing the promise and power of these technologies, recognizing that the corpus of evidence is there for us to like really start leaning into them. And ultimately, it's all about improving people's lives. Annie, I want to thank you so much for your partnership in this. I'm excited for people to start diving into the tool. I'm excited for the way that sort of industry colleagues may be hopefully approaching you with intentionality in sort of higher numbers going forward. But I also want to reflect that, this isn't the start. I think that the power of this tool is bringing together the best part of 10 years of research, the best part of 10 years of tireless innovation, and the best part of 10 years of regulatory science and the issuing of really quite tremendous guidances across both CDRH and CDER. So just thank you for your leadership in this. Thank you for the way that you came to the table in this work, really wanting to make sure that the sort of regulatory posture, the embrace of these tools and technologies, wanting to use every tool that's available to us to improve lives. And you wanted to make sure that we were able to meet our industry colleagues where they are with what they need in order to make it as easy as possible for them to be successful. So as always, it's a pleasure collaborating. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And with that, I have the pleasure of handing it off to my colleague, Sarah. Sarah, you have been magnificent from the internal Dime team at leading this. There has been an enormous amount of resources. And in the same way that everything we do is grounded in the needs of the patients that we serve, you built this toolkit for our industry colleagues and never once stopped listening to their challenges, to what they needed, to what value was going to look like. And I think the reason this tool is going to have such impact on the field is because you were sort of dogged in pursuit of supporting our colleagues with this. So thank you for everything. And I'm very excited for you to share all of this with our colleagues on the line.
Thank you, Jen, for those kind words. And thank you to both you and Annie for setting us up so perfectly with those opening remarks and that fantastic conversation. And thank you both for your relentless leadership in this space, for championing the digital health community, digital measures in particular, and patient-centric medical product development. At Dime, we know this digital measure space really well. As Jen alluded, there's 10 years plus now of work that's gone into really understanding how these technologies are being leveraged, ensuring that they are being used in a for purpose way. In just the last few years alone here at Dime, we've delivered 7 community-led core digital measures resources, including one for pediatric rare disease. Just had to drop that in there in case you haven't seen it yet. Those are fantastic resources. But so here we've been at Dime championing the excellent work that all of you are doing in this space, supporting where we can, cheering on your successes and celebrating progress as these technologies continue to mature and get more powerful than ever. And as Jen and Annie mentioned, championing the fact that the regulatory landscape is maturing and that we have very real signals of support and confidence that the regulators want to see these measures as well. And yet we do know that progress in policy and science does not always immediately transfer to a zero friction experience. As Annie said so well, when this works, when you successfully deploy digital measures in a clinical trial, there are a lot of diverse stakeholders and different perspectives that have to come to the table and get things sort of aligned and right to be successful. That's not always easy. And so, about a year ago, we commenced a pretty comprehensive needs assessment to really understand, okay, we have a lot of proof points, we have a lot of learnings at this point in the field, and also there are some challenges, and we really wanted to understand what that looked like. So we started with a rigorous scoping review of peer-reviewed literature, of regulatory materials, of industry or gray literature that was specifically scoped to the use of sensor-based digital health technologies in clinical trials. And then we paired that with detailed interviews with many of you, sDHT developers, adopters, regulators. And we said, what's working? Where have you seen success? And where are there still challenges and what would help? And we synthesized all of that into this resource that I am so proud to be able to share with you. Let me share my screen and introduce to you this new flagship resource, the sDHT Adoption Navigator, that has 2 core components to really help you navigate this ecosystem and accelerate your success. So first, we have this roadmap. This is an interactive guide organized around key decision points that teams commonly encounter when they are developing or adopting these technologies in clinical trials. This especially speaks to points where teams really have to stop, ask key questions, get alignment with those different perspectives, and get the right context so that they can make informed and meaningful choices. This is meant to be a resource where you're presented with key context, questions you might want to ask, things you might want to consider. And we also on every page point you directly to relevant regulatory materials and best-in-class industry resources from Dime, but others as well, that can help set you up for success. This is a resource that you can, it's very content heavy. Most of you are not going to go page by page, nor should you. You can bookmark where you've been, save things you want to come back to later. You can jump around as needed to find the things that are most relevant for you. For those of you that are newer to this space, this roadmap is going to be invaluable for you. But for those of you who are very experienced in digital measures, this is also going to be useful to you. I know you spend a lot of time educating others, getting buy-in, just keeping your finger on all the things that are happening and all the resources. And so this is for you as well. And on that note, let me introduce you to Navi. Navi is your closed environment AI research assistant that is built on a very carefully curated library of those diverse regulatory and scientific and industry resources that we captured in that scoping review. Rather than manually searching, I mean, you could if you want, and you can do your own lit review, but you can also just come straight here to Navi, ask natural language questions, and immediately start to surface relevant references, guidances, and other key materials so that you can immediately locate and then dig into the context and things you care about. As new resources are added over time, we will add those here so that Navi will help you stay on top of that evolving landscape. Okay, so this is not meant to replace Google or Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude, right? Those tools are very good at what they do. This is not scraping the internet in real time to pick up the latest like consultancy blog post, things of that nature. This is a very powerful, tightly curated knowledge base focused on sDHTs for medical product development. And that's in fact very, very powerful. We know that this process is not prescriptive or one size fits all. Every program is different. But no matter what your role is your program or your product or the number of years you've been in this space, I promise there are materials and insights in this library and in this navigator that are going to be valuable to you. Navi interrogates this closed notebook and the content in the roadmap. So no matter what you're trying to do, there will be things that are of value to you. And Navi is going to be a very powerful and efficient way for you to find and then leverage those materials. Please also know that this is a living resource. As I mentioned, we can add things as the field continues to produce quality content. And so it will evolve and grow with the field. To that end, if you are aware of a regulatory or scientific resource that you think should be in here and isn't, I'd love to hear from you. Similarly, if you have a pain point or a success story from your own work that you'd like to see captured in this navigator, I'd also love to hear about that and learn from you. There's a contact us button right here where you can ask questions or submit those types of things so we can vet and include them where appropriate. So I am very excited to release this to you. It is meant to be fairly accessible and self-explanatory. I will leave it to you to explore on your own and look forward to hearing how you are using it. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Ben Van Andries, Dime's Chief Delivery Officer, for a panel discussion with some of you who are doing this work in this space and doing it very well, and I'm excited about that. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for making the time to join our webinar, join this panel on what I assume, now that you've gotten a sneak peek from Sarah, looks to you also like a truly exciting resource, because it does to me. So my name is Ben Van Andries. I'm the Chief Delivery Officer over at Dime, and I cannot wait to see and hear what many of the people on the line and beyond are going to be doing with the navigator and the new applications that they're naturally gonna find for it because of its interactive nature. And especially from the perspective of having, had a developer hat on myself, as an enabler of an efficient communication across teams with regulators, and frankly, as a time-saving tool for teams that are either brand new to DHTs or experts on the topic or anywhere in between. So the way that if you have a chance to go through the roadmap, you'll see that we kind of split the target audience for this resource into what we call adopters. So adopters of digital health technologies in order to measure a digital endpoint, and developers, meaning the developers of those digital health technologies. And we have representatives from both on the line here, as well as FDA for our panel discussion. So we're going to start with a very quick round of introductions from everyone, and then dive straight in. So Robert, do you mind kicking us off with a quick introduction, please?
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you. I'm Robert Wright. I'm a social scientist in the Division of Patient-Centered Development at the Center for Disease and Radiological Health at the FDA, and I focus on patient-generated health data.
Thank you, Robert. Milos.
Hi, Ben. Hello, all. Really pleasure to join you here in this panel. I'm Milos Todorovic. I'm with Analog Devices. We are one of those technology developers in this space, and we are driving the mostly remote patient monitoring, but also other types of technologies into the industry.
Thank you and welcome. Mikesh.
Hi, Ben. Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone, depending on which part of the world you're in. And thank you, Dime, for inviting me. I'm Mikesh. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Alvis Health. We help pharma companies collect objective data in their clinical trials. So just like Milos, we're one of the adopters. And we do that using this device that we've built. It sits on the bedside table and automatically measures sleep, vital signs, and cough, and a range of other metrics without anyone needing to do or wear anything. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
All right, thank you. Melissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Cerullo, and I'm thrilled to be here today and continue a strong collaboration with the Dime team. My background is in medical devices. I've been on the engineering and development side for 25 years. I specifically have had the pleasure of working in the middle of engineering and data science, which I think from the earlier commentary has been a really great way for me to see how both of these things come together in support of DHTs. And at Medidata, I support the biomarker development of novel endpoints for clinical research.
Thank you. And Eric, do you mind closing us out?
Sure, Ben. Thanks. I'm Eric Koenig from Takeda. I head our strategic innovation team in oncology and the focus of our digital health technology strategy, which includes sensor-based DHT. So happy to be here.
All right, thank you all. Just kind of on a practical note, I'm going to be calling out names so that we avoid this kind of like thing where everybody in a virtual setting is looking at each other about who's going to speak first. That does not mean that if you have something to say, if you have something that you want to comment on, clarify, please just jump in. Okay. So to dive straight in and kind of to set the stage, I would like to first focus on finding and hearing from all of you a few examples of challenges that you've encountered in the real world, right? And could each of you, we'll do this kind of round robin style, if that's okay, go through an example of like a period of confusion or misalignment that you encountered in your work when developing, or for that matter, considering to develop a medical product supported by a digital endpoint from your unique perspective as a developer, as an adopter, or, and I think that's fair to say, some people that are maybe sitting more on kind of like the interface between those two definitions. Melissa, do you mind starting us off there?
Sure. So in several different occasions where we were developing a new digital health product or a system, I think the regulatory question with regards to which pathway is appropriate for what we're building. And I think that there's seems to be gray areas. And even though we have read all of the guidance documents, I think the interpretation of those guidance documents and how that specifically has implications to what we're developing. And so for a few different of the systems that we've been working on, both hardware systems as well as software only systems, I think the question becomes, is this a software as a medical device? Should we go to CDRH? Is this more appropriate for CDER as a DDT? And then everything in between. And so I think that there was a lot of discussion with regards to the pathway and the solution, because we didn't have the people in-house to really make those decisions for us, is to hire a regulatory consultant to help us with those types of decision making. And even today, I think that we're still, I think the guide will be really helpful at this point because we're still navigating the, particular options that we have, and FDA may send us to a different, on a different pathway depending on the review of the materials. And so to me, that has been one of the most challenging components of bringing a new technology like this into market, is really trying to understand the fit in the regulatory pathway.
All right, thank you, Melissa. That makes a lot of sense and definitely resonates with, or at least it resonates in the sense that it is something that we've heard many people, especially people in the network of Dime that we interact with on a frequent basis, have heard them mentioned before. It is probably the number one question that always comes up when people are getting started on a new endeavor there. Milos, how about we go to you?
Sure. So from our perspective, as someone who is actually developing these types of solutions and trying to launch them into the market, I will echo what Melissa said on the regulatory side, but it goes beyond that. Getting that regulatory clearance or approval is just the first step to actually commercializing something. And given that these types of technologies, sensor-based digital health technologies, sort of have two distinct markets. One is on the care side, and the other one is more on the research side, which is, I'm looking at some of the pharma folks here in the room. You ultimately need to understand also who, first of all, is paying for this, and then what are they willing to pay for, and consider that as early as possible. So it is okay, and I think the regulatory landscape has matured significantly in the past few years. I've been in this space since there's been called mHealth and even before that, right? So 15, 20 years ago. So huge progress in that sense. But I think now we need to really get that next hurdle figured out and work closely together from the early days of developing not only the clinical evidence, but the health economics and outcomes evidence that can support, first of all, developing a particular solution and then launching it into the market.
Thank you. And for those in the audience that are eagle-eyed, you may have seen when Sarah was clicking through the roadmap that at some point there was a section there on the ROI calculator, which is the return on investment calculator for the use of digital endpoints in clinical trials, right? So it's not about the care delivery side; it is about the research side of things. But it is an important resource that is like very firmly embedded in the Navigator because it's such an important tool to have to be able to speak to your colleagues as to why this is going to not just lead to better patient outcomes, but also make business sense, right? So on that note, Eric,
Yeah,
how
so
about we go to you?
sure, happy to. I think this ties pretty well, Ben, with Milos and both your comments there. One of our challenges that we face from the industry perspective is that we didn't really align on the value proposition. Does the DHT is expected to speed data collection, really reduce patient burden, or improve overall signal or sensitivity? And then without that clarity, functions, within the industry prioritize different things. The DHT sometimes and often becomes more of a seen as an add-on, right? So how do we resolve that? So it's really then that gaining that clinical evidence, and we generate a real-world clinical pilot to define that patient population, see what the operational value is, and I think tying those together, you're moving more toward deployment, adoption, and it's data-driven, right? The proof is there of where the value is to adopt that DHT for that trial or post-marketing.
Thank you, Eric. Mikesh.
Hi, thanks. I do echo the points that Milos and Melissa mentioned. These are all very important business considerations. I'll take a couple of steps back in the journey of developers. In the early days, for any new measures or any new parameters that we want to monitor, it's not always clear what the precise measurement should be, what should be the unit, the gold standard that we validate against, the accuracy requirements, and so on. So just as an example, shortness of breath is quite important in a range of diseases. Sleep is important in practically every chronic disease. But how exactly do you measure sleep? Is it total sleep time, number of awakenings, or do you come up with yet another novel sleep score? And then no system is 100% accurate. And even more so when the gold standard is not always reliable. So sometimes it's not clear what the gold standard should be or what the desired level of accuracy should be. And long ago, years ago, when we were starting out, we did our own literature review. We spoke to stakeholders, including patients, key opinion leaders, sponsors. We did statistical analysis to understand what is the degree of change needed to see a clinically meaningful difference or something that makes a difference in decision making that helps take the decision one way or the other. We looked at implications downstream for different accuracy levels, and then we arrived at answers to all of these questions. This is now a standard practice that we follow, and of course, a lot of the resources that Dime have created are very helpful in reaching at answers to these questions.
Yeah, and when I hear you say that, like where my mind immediately goes is also what Jen alluded to at the start here of the webinar, which is that like this resource is really a wrapper around lots of stuff that has happened over the last 5 to 10 years, not only by Dime, very much so by the field. But if we're focusing on especially what Dime has done over the last couple of years in terms of releasing resources with a digital measure focus, like the V3 Plus framework, the validating novel digital clinical measures, which is a mouthful, but is very much focused on identifying the right reference measure. Like, is there such a thing as a gold standard or not? And if there's not, how do you go about figuring out where to go, right? How do you talk to regulators about that? There's all the core measure projects that we've done around physical activity, sleep, and there's many more out on the website, and all of that gets tied back into this resource, right? So it's a place where you can start asking these questions and then get pointed in the right direction. So on that note, I'd like to go to you, Robert. I'm going to rephrase the question slightly because you're, of course, coming from this with a slightly different perspective from the agency. So if you're thinking of the successful use of sensor-based digital health technologies, we all know that it really, like success to a large degree depends on successful collaboration between developers and adopters. And a line that the FDA very often likes to use is engage with us early and often, right? So from your perspective, if you're looking at in like your day-to-day work or your colleagues' day-to-day work, where have you seen examples of where that early alignment really allows a development program uh, to be more successful, to move faster, to kind of meet, like not get stuck in the weeds and get through those initial hurdles quicker and therefore maybe have a competitive advantage over others?
Yeah, thank you. And again, I'm in CDRH, so taking this from the devices perspective a little bit, but that alignment shows up in, I think, some of what we touched on so far is better understanding of what the technology does, where those reference standards are, and how that fits into the adoption and how that fits into what the endpoint is, and understanding what is actually being captured, what is not being captured. Differentiating between the two allows us at a high level to kind of be on the same page and then focus more on what are the specifics, what are the details we need to get into instead of spending time focusing on the very large picture and alignment.
Got it. Thank you, Robert. So to switch gears here a little bit, I believe that everyone has had a sneak peek with the Navigator, actually hands-on, not just the quick demo that Sarah provided for everyone in the webinar here, before it's going live to everyone. Which again, to emphasize that, which is right after the webinar. I'm keen to hearing when you were using it, what ideas that started percolating as you were checking it out, right? Like based on like your experience with obviously with your day-to-day work, the challenges that come with that. When you were going through Navi, when you were clicking through the roadmap, what are some of the things, maybe going back to the example you just shared of that point of friction, where now you think, okay, if this happens again, this is what I could use this resource for. Here, maybe it could save me time. It could create clarity. It could allow me to move faster, engage with regulators, all the things that we want it to do high level. But like if we dig one level deeper, I'm really curious to hear from all of you, like what those things were that really connect back to your day-to-day work and your day-to-day challenges. Eric, do you mind if we start with you?
Sure, happy to. I mean, it echoes a little bit from Jen and Annie's chat too. There's a lot of stakeholders here that you have to deal with, and I think having the roadmap would have made it, accelerated that alignment far earlier, which would have been great, right? It clearly, like you said, outlines evidence, expectations, the context of use, kind of the validation and steps along that journey. I think it's particularly for those teams that are less familiar with DHTs, and so really it's a great educational tool that, if I had a few years back, would have made my job and kind of that getting to that stakeholder engagement and kind of justification a lot more efficiently. And then you keep going back to it. You bookmark it, you go back to it. You don't have to reinvent or repopulate. Here's why we want to move DHTs forward in the clinical trials. So it's actually a great tool from what I've used so far.
The number of times I thought to myself, if I've had this several number of years ago. Thank you, Eric. Mikesh.
Yeah, well, I echo your thoughts, Ben. And I was thinking also for my colleagues, if we have a new team member who's joining, let's say we have a new head of QA/RA, and they of course need to learn about Albus, but they need to learn a lot about the industry in some cases. So this would be a great resource to point to them and say, well, ask them all of your questions and build what we need to do based off of this very well curated set of resources, both from DIME and from the FDA. And we're going to be, I hope to do a lot of that in the coming months and years.
All right, thank you. Milos.
I think that's a universal message of an educational resource that we all wish had 5 years ago, right? So similarly to what was already said, I think, especially in larger organizations where different departments handle different functions and all need to come together to actually enable a project that results ultimately in a product that goes into the market. Educational piece often gets lost, I think, and it's hard, especially for the champions, to keep having the same conversation over and over, right? So having the ability to condense that, but also keep it updated, which I really appreciate that you guys put an AI overlay on top of this, I think is going to be extremely useful. And I think also as the resource evolves and becomes better in a way, right? And more information is added to the database, to the curated space, I think it will also become more efficient in really coming up with strategies and guidance that can be followed almost as is at the face value, as opposed to, I feel that it's right now, a lot of us are still doing a lot of curation when it comes to using external resources. Given that this is industry driven, expert driven, I think eventually it will get to the point where it can do a lot of what we do. And then I guess I'll have to worry about my job.
Well, that's like that's what the I'm going to make a statement here. What the sensible people in the room often say is that the introduction of a new tool allows those that are the experts already to move on to more impactful things, right? So, Melissa.
Yeah, my first impression was wow. Dime took a really creative approach on how to represent this information and the fact that there's really two simple ways to get into the resources from either from the roadmap or from Navi, I thought was just really user friendly and made the information really accessible and easy to navigate. So first off, I thought that you guys did a great job at just the organization of the tool and thinking about the usability of the tool. And then getting into it, to me, it's a run book. And I think it's something that we know that it is generated from a lot of standards, from a lot of guidance documents. And so the considerations and all of the processes that are outlined in there, I think that we can have confidence that we could follow those and repeat that for many projects. And the other nugget that I thought was in there were the examples. I really liked how you provided several examples, both from regulatory spotlight as well as from the industry. And those are really helpful in explaining to other stakeholders the evidence and how other folks are doing the same things and some of the considerations that they had to go through in order to get to the outcome. So I agree with everybody that I want to go back and spend more time and really find that this is going to be a very helpful resource, regardless of where you are in your development cycle.
Thank you, Melissa. And maybe before going to you, Robert, if I can ask, so like a theme that's definitely coming up is the need for alignment, right? The need for coordination across different teams and all that, which is not new. We've known that for a long time. It's not necessarily even unique to digital health, right? But what is unique to digital health is that we often have the situation where you have developers ranging from tiny startups all the way to very well-established companies that need to engage and really cross the aisle towards an adopter sitting in life sciences pharma, right? Where you don't have the power to say, this is how we're going to do it, right? Because you have to find something that works for both parties. And so when you're thinking of like kind of navigating that tension, which I'm sure is something that all of you have done repeatedly, do you think that the way that you're looking at Navigator as a resource is primarily an educational tool for within a developer company, for within a pharma adopter company? Or is there, do you think, also an opportunity for it to be an educational tool about making those connections across? And that's really a question for the group.
Ben, I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think I kind of clearly outlined earlier that it really was a good educational tool, can be as it's now launching for pharma and the alignment of the teams here. But I think gives that other additional perspective of regulatory and the developers and kind of, bridging together, I think makes it more, makes it even more powerful.
Thank you, Eric.
I think from my perspective, and I pressure test Navi, I asked it to come up with a strategy to launch a remote patient monitoring solution into the market. Came up with a pretty good answer, actually. It captured all of the necessary pieces that someone would need to consider when looking into this space. So from that perspective, I think it's already doing its job. But what it really does do is promote and emphasizes the need for that collaboration. Now, maybe the next step in there is down the road as we all use it more. Hopefully, there is also a connector that is maybe working in the background that can help those looking to do something or have expertise in a particular space connect with those that can complement them down the road. And I know sometimes I mean, all of the times we leverage our own networks, right? But sometimes we do not necessarily have the right pieces or right people in our network. So having a tool that can help with that, I think, would be a great extension of what this tool already is.
Got it. I'm making notes. Thank you. Robert, going back to you and like your very unique regulatory perspective here. So you and your colleagues are obviously triaging requests for meetings, for information. You already alluded to that. And when you think about specifically the positioning of the navigator and what it can and cannot do for that matter, where do you see clear opportunities for the agency to help people navigate how they come to you for the first time or the third time or the eighth time to ask their questions and be successful at that and be efficient at that? Because obviously on your end too, you have to triage, you have to manage your time, and you're getting inundated with requests. So how are you looking at how this resource can potentially help streamline that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think you mentioned earlier, like we asked to come in early and often, and then Melissa made a comment of like, we don't know how. We spent a lot of time, there's a section in the roadmap on engaging regulators, and we spent a lot of time trying to make sure that is as much info as we have and trying to put that into word or framework where people can come in, know where to come in, know what the options are, whether it is you're ready to talk about a pivotal trial or whether you're just first thinking of this idea and how to kind of incorporate it. We want to make sure that we have pathways to get you answers. I think our ultimate goal is to kind of drive innovation to help promote safe and effective medical products. And knowing that needing to move fast, sometimes needing to go slow. In the beginning, if we're aligned, we can hopefully move things along faster. So those early interactions do help in the long run, getting things to future regulatory interactions moving much faster.
Gotcha. Thank you, Robert. In the last few minutes that we have, let's be traditional for a second and do a quick fire round, 60 seconds or less. If you look ahead at the immediate future, let's not do the thing where we're looking at 5 years, 10 years, but like the immediate future, right? Like from your perspective, the next 2 to 3 years. And if you're looking at what you know about sensor-based digital health technologies and how they are maturing, like what is going to distinguish the teams, probably the multidisciplinary teams that in your opinion are going to be successful at actually moving from the current state of the field to broad scale implementation? And Mikesh, do you mind starting?
Sure. Very quickly, I think it'll be not to reinvent the wheel, look at what's been done, learn from it, and take the field forward with everyone else in mind, patients, regulators, decision makers from pharma, and so on.
Love not reinventing the wheel. Eric.
I think the real winners here will be those that design DHTs around the patient first and the site experience. And if the DHT then reduces that patient burden, enables participation to centralized trials and patients from home, the operational benefits to pharma, to the industry will follow naturally. And I think that's what's needed.
Thank you. Robert.
Yeah, I 100% agree with the patient centricity of it, aligning that. And then those that have kind of those pathways built out, we talked about all the different teams that are involved in doing these. So the more you build those pathways now, the future, immediate future, rolling out new digital technologies will work easier as well, hopefully.
Makes sense. Melissa?
3 things are really critical to distinguish the teams. I think the first one is making the device, the tech, as easy as possible to use and having it fit into normal everyday life. The second one is the ability to get data quickly and to have the infrastructure to support all of that processing as real time as possible. And the third one is ensuring that you're designing your studies so that you're collecting the right data so that you can do the analytics to get to that meaningful impact and the meaningful insights. And I think all of those things done complying with the standards and the regulations that this framework is putting forward for us to all be following the V3 framework and other standards as it pertains to data and data sharing and measurement types of standards.
Got it. Thank you. And Milos, do you mind rounding us out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think also there are several critical aspects that we all need to be paying attention to. Collaborating as early as possible and considering the perspectives of everyone involved, with patient centricity probably taking the key spot in all of that. Designing these solutions to be fit for purpose, whatever that purpose is, whether that is clinical research or that is the care delivery. And then ultimately, because one of the biggest promises of these types of technologies is the increasing the access and broadening the sort of continuum of care, if you will, on one side, or the ability to execute quickly on the other side when we talk about the research, really designing these to be as usable and as integrated into, as Melissa said, daily living as possible. I think that is one of the key things that we all talk about, but we have to get better at it, I think.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for your time, for being here, for actually testing the resource, giving us very valuable feedback. All of that is greatly appreciated. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Sarah to close out the webinar.
Panelists, thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I so appreciate you sharing your hard-earned wisdom and insights with us, and for, as always, bringing things back to what really matter, which is that we have medical products that ultimately serve patients well. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank not only you, our panelists, but like Ben said, our user testers, our needs assessment participants, all of you who are in this space and who bring your leadership and excellence every single day, and often, quite frankly, very Herculean efforts, so that we collectively can transform medicine and how we care for each other. You are all amazing. I also would like to quickly thank Annie and Robert and all of our current and former FDA colleagues. You have been such good and continue to be such good partners to us here at Diamond, to the digital health community at large. And we're also so grateful for the critically important work that you do every single day in that same shared endeavor. So thank you. We appreciate you. As we briefly wrap up this webinar, I want to draw your attention to two incredible projects that are quickly approaching here at Dime. For the first one, we'll wait for the slides to advance one forward, please. Thank you. For our upcoming project on optimizing direct-to-patient strategies, please join us to help design, implement, and scale patient-centric DTP models that optimize access, affordability, adherence, and data visibility. That's a mouthful, but all very important and incredibly exciting work. There's a QR code there to learn more. And in the second opportunity that's rapidly approaching, Dime is convening leaders across the ecosystem to create the first open source toolkit for operationalizing AI governance in healthcare. So these are both going to be fantastic opportunities. Please do follow the QR codes or see our website at dimesociety.org to learn more. So again, thank you all so much for the incredible work you do. Thank you for joining us for the release of this Navigator. Can't wait to hear how you are using it. Please do use it. And there's that contact us link on the Navigator to get in touch if you have questions or want to share your learnings. Thank you all for being here with us today. And that's it. Thank you, everyone.